You're listening to Bigfoot Society, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. In this show, we go beyond the campfire stories to bring you firsthand encounters from people who say they've seen something impossible, from backwoods trails and remote mountain haulers to quiet farms and crowded highways. The stories come from everywhere, and each one leaves us with more questions than answers. These are the voices of the people who've lived it, so settle in, because today you'll hear another account that just might change the way you see the woods forever. So stay with us. All right, Bigfoot Society, you've got the privilege of talking to Jeffrey today. Jeffrey is a pastor, outdoorsman, big game hunter, a lot of things going on in the outdoors realm. Welcome to the show, Jeffrey. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing very good, thank you.
Awesome. And you listen to the show over on the YouTube side, is that right?
Yes, I do. I catch a couple episodes a week, a lot of the older ones. Yeah, very interesting show.
Perfect. And thank you so much for doing that. Jeffrey, we have definitely some interesting things to talk about, but we were talking a little bit beforehand, before recording started, and we are going to you're actually going to start your story back a little bit earlier, talk about how you were introduced really to Bigfoot in general, and then we'll go from there. So feel free to take it away, Jeffrey, and take us back to when this all started for you.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, so my father was a big game hunter and got me into it, and he used to take a lot of trips out of town when I was little. I think one of my earliest memories was when I was about 4, and him packing up his gear to go on a hunting trip after mule deer and elk into the Rocky Mountains and such. And so it's been a part of my life. The outdoors has hunting, fishing, hiking, and been very successful as an outdoorsman and a hunter. My life, which has put me out there in the woods a lot, in the mountains and the Rockies, to experience a lot of the natural beauty of the world and such. And I remember when my dad got back from one of his trips, he, for the first time and the only time in my memory, he decided to take the family to the movie theater. And so I was like 5 or 6 years old, pretty excited to get to go to the movie theater. This was back in the 60s. And so interesting, what was the movie going to be? It was a double feature, Bigfoot and Cougar Country. And of all things, my dad wanted to go see Bigfoot, the Patterson-Gimli film. And that's where I saw that in a theater when I was about 6 years old. And it was fascinating. I had to say I was much more interested in the Patterson-Gimlin film than I was the Cougar Country. That was boring after seeing Bigfoot running across the screen like that. So that was my first exposure to it. And what was interesting then, shortly after that, of course, being back in the 60s, 35 millimeter film, my dad was not a photographer. He carried around his little pocket cameras that would manually click through. And so he took that hunting with him, take pictures of his trips and such. And he brought out a photograph. And it was snowy background up in the mountains and across there. And he showed it to me and he said, "Oh, why don't you look at that? See that spot right there?" He says, "I think that was like a juvenile Bigfoot." Of course, I think he used a small kid or child Bigfoot. I'm only 6, juvenile wasn't. But that's what he was implying. And I'm looking at this thing, and I look at that photo for a while, and he says, "Yeah, it was there most of the morning." And of course, I to this day, I'm not sure what I saw in that photograph. But I remember that vividly, is him showing that photo. And I don't even know where that photo is at today. It's a little too late now to be asking my father about it. Maybe when my mother passes away, I'll be able to rummage through all the hundreds and hundreds of old photos and find it. But what was interesting about it is I got later in life, what is that term when faces or figures and things that aren't there? Was it pareidolia?
Yeah, exactly. You got it. Yep.
Yeah. As I remember back and looking at that photo, that effect wasn't in play at all. And so it wasn't like a trick of shadows he was showing me or anything in my mind. And what I saw, there was something else there that, because for me, it was hard for me to even pick it out. So I don't think he was showing me so much a trick of the shadows, but maybe there was something there. And I wish I had the photo. I wish I could ask him, but never talked about Bigfoot again after that. it was not a subject. And of course, over the years, he got me out in the mountains with him hunting and fishing and stuff. And never really was Bigfoot a concern or even a thought. It was an interesting idea. But by the time I was in my mid-20s, getting towards the later 20s, I'd spent countless hours in the mountains. In fact, when I was up to that time in my life, I had about 30-hour-a-week job. And when I wasn't working, I was hunting or fishing and sleeping in my car up on the mountain with a fishing pole or a bow or a rifle or a shotgun or something. And I'd come home and shower and take off into work and then repeat that process over again. I lived to be in the mountains and spending the night alone in the mountains. As a guide, I would leave camp. And when we would go on our hunting trips with my father, I'd leave camp at 6 before the sun came up. And I wouldn't get back till after the sun went down unless I got something. So I spent hours out in the dark and such. Never had any experiences whatsoever. It was a week or two ago, you had a gentleman on that was up at Loon Lake in Idaho, up above McCall. Yeah. And I spent all my years south of Loon Lake, down between there and the Boise area and over to Hells Canyon or the west of that. In that block of area. And so that's where all of my experiences take place when I began to actually maybe experience some Bigfoot encounters. Not a lot. I hunted in that area for nearly 40 years. And there's only 2 or 3 maybe times when I really thought I was experiencing something. But so it's my later 20s and I'm up hunting. I got rifle season. I got a elk tag and a bear tag in my pocket. I drive up, head out in a couple miles off the road to get out there, overlook a canyon before dark. And I'm sitting there, and it was about 300 yards, maybe 350 yards across this canyon where the trees would break out into some heavy brush. And I'm watching this hillside, hoping a nice bull would walk out. And I see movement across the canyon just on the edge of the trees. Later in the evening, and the sun's cutting through the mountain peaks and through some clouds, it was patchy light. And so I caught movement. I put my binoculars up and I see a flash of dark black. So immediately I'm thinking, that's a bear. There's a bear over there. Bear season's still open. I've got a tag. So I catch another glimpse through my binoculars, and yeah, this is definitely not an elk, definitely not a deer. Based on just the glimpses I'm getting, it can't be either one of those creatures, so it has to be a bear. So I get my rifle up, start looking for him in the scope, and he's moving up the canyon across the way from me. And as I'm watching him, I get at the sun. He goes in a sunny spot, and I never see his full body because he's on the edge where the brush is. And so I'm kind of looking through brush, hoping he'll step out, this bear will step out and give me a good shot. He's moving swift, which is kind of surprising. I don't think any other hunters around, so I can't figure out why he'd be moving so quickly up this canyon. But he's moving quick, and like I said, he stepped out just a little bit I caught this glisten off his back. It was an orangish, blondish color I caught, and I think, okay, even better, this is a phase bear. It's a bear, not black, it's off phase, which would make a really nice trophy. So I was getting excited, and I'm tracking him and see glimpses, trying to wait for him to give me that good shoulder shot. And then I begin to see things that don't make sense. I'm like, where I think I see a head, I don't see any ears. When I think I see a rump, it's out of position, or a shoulder seems to be too high up above his back end, but I'm never seeing the whole body. And I keep looking at this thing through the scope, and then I see what I think is a completely out of place, like an arm swing by. And a bear's front legs just don't look like that. They're just not long enough to resemble an arm. The front legs are, especially when he's moving quickly, they're going to be down on the ground, and the position was just not making sense to me. And it began to really concern me. And after I saw a couple more glances of things that just weren't making sense, I began worried maybe I had my rifle on another hunter. But that didn't make it sense either. It was moving too quickly, too smooth. Just that gait that just was effortless. as he went up the canyon, climbing the edge of that canyon, still in the brush and the trees. I could see him weaving in and out of that. And it was mind-boggling. And it really unnerved me because I felt like, oh no, I've had my rifle pointed at another man, another hunter, for the last 2 or 3 minutes. And so I pulled down the rifle and put the binoculars up, and watched him for going in and out of the brush for probably another 2 or 3 minutes, and then it was gone. Never saw it, never heard a thing, which isn't unusual. If it's a bear, can be very quiet. They have pads on rather than hooves, so that they don't break branches or anything like a deer or an elk would, especially an elk. So they're very quiet animals. But it really was a sickening feeling in my stomach to think that maybe I had pointed my rifle at another person, but I couldn't reconcile it. It couldn't reconcile it. It definitely wasn't a deer, definitely wasn't an elk. At the time I thought, but it had to be a bear. It couldn't, but it didn't look like a bear. And so I go back, it's getting dark, so I walk out of there in the dark, back to my vehicle. My plan was to spend the night there. I wasn't much for camping. When you're young, you sleep anywhere, anyhow. So I just lay the seat back and conk out for the night, get up and grab a few donuts and a jug of milk and head up to the hills again. That's how I operated. I wanted to be mobile in case I didn't see anything, I could move on. Hunting was such a thing in my blood and my life. That was more important than a good camp. So I spent the night there, and I got up the next morning, and I really had trouble sleeping. It was really, whether it was the excitement, whether it was the nerves of how upset I was that I had maybe had my rifle pointed at a human, which was completely, I don't know if you've ever had an experience like that, but it's very unnerving, especially for somebody who's drilled gun safety and weapon safety their whole life. So the next day I circled back around. I decided to go across the canyon to where I saw what I thought was a bear. And I'm going to go look for sign and see if maybe I can find, maybe he's back in the area. Maybe I'll redeem myself and actually see that he was a bear. But I get over there, and I'd never been across this canyon before. This is a place that I was newly exploring. And I get over there, and I'm walking. I walk up and down that ridge for a couple hours on the edges of the trees, and I couldn't even see where I was. I couldn't look across the canyon and see where I was sitting because the brush was too tall. And I could not find a place anywhere where a bear, a deer, or an elk would have been tall enough for me to have seen it where this thing was walking. And it was, after a couple hours of searching, I gave up and completely baffled. The idea that I possibly was seeing a Sasquatch at the time, it didn't even come into my mind. I wasn't there. At this point, I'd spent 15 years alone in the mountains all the time. Even when my dad would take me hunting as a young kid, we'd split up, and I'd take off by myself. He'd take off and have a plan. So I was used to being in the woods alone, and never once did I ever think, oh, I hope I don't run into a Bigfoot. And so the thought that this thing could have been a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch, it just never occurred to me. And it wasn't until recently that I began to realize and come to terms with what I had seen, because nothing else fits the scenario. There's no body, no person, no creature, no animal that could have moved and been that tall to have seen over the brush. Anything else in that particular area where he was going up and down the canyon would have been out of sight, would have been hidden behind the brush. So, like I said, it probably wasn't until in the last year that I've really figured out that maybe that was a first encounter I've had with a Sasquatch. Now, and I roll forward about another 10 years in my mid-30s. And again, I'm hunting. And I've been hunting all these years, too much hunting. That was my hobby. I was working or I was hunting at that point in my life. I wasn't even really a pastor and slightly involved in church ancillary, but that wasn't really a driver. But it was about 10 years later, and me and my dad, this is a spot that I'd hunted a lot. And one of my hunting places, I had my particular route I would take up into the hills. It was an all-day hike. I would leave camp, like I said, before the sun came up, hike all day and come back and hit camp after the sun had dropped so I could be out where the animals were. And so I'd climb this hill. It was a nice day, sunshiny day. And I get up and it's about 10 o'clock, 10:30 in the morning. And I come to one of the first areas where I would usually sit down and take a mid-morning break overlooking a nice canyon where I'd seen deer and elk before. And so I'm looking down over that canyon. And behind me is the trail I came in on, and it goes down into extremely brushy canyon, which I had never saw. You could hear them from 20, 50, 100 yards away if they went through there. It was so thick with brush. And so I sat down. I'm sitting behind this nice big tree I usually sit under where I can see the canyon, get out a little snack from breakfast. Sat there for maybe 10 minutes. And something thumps to the ground in the bushes about 10 feet to my right. And I look over, and I don't see anything that hit there, but my first instinct, this was a big pine cone maybe fell out of the tree. So I'm looking to see if the tree had pine cones in it, big pine cones that would make that kind of thumping noise, or maybe I would see a squirrel up there. But usually when you're that close to squirrels in the mountains, they're chattering at you. They don't want you. They see you. They get scared. They chatter at you. Then every squirrel in the area knows there's somebody there that doesn't belong. But there's no chattering of squirrels. And so I sit there, and probably 5 minutes later, something else thumps right next to me in the same spot about 10 feet away. And I look over and I see this rock about the size of a golf ball bounce into the brush. And I go, there's somebody behind me throwing rocks at me. And I pride myself on being really sneaky in the woods. I don't want the animals to know I'm there. I don't want other hunters to know I'm there. I like to get in and get out. If I see other hunters and they don't see me, that's a goal of mine, not to be seen, to be just part of the wilderness. So that I would be sitting there quietly concealed behind this tree, and hunter was throwing rocks at me. That was disappointing. So I sit there real quietly, and now I'm paying more attention to listening for what's behind me. And another one plops in, same spot, about the same size rock. I think, all right, this is weird. So the tree's large enough where you can't see me from the other side. And I'm able to stand up real slowly. And my idea is to just peer around this tree and figure out who's throwing rocks at me. I want to know who's this other hunter that would have the nerve to start throwing rocks at me in the trees in the woods. That's not something you do. It's like, what kind of joker is this? Maybe I know a couple guys that hunt up there. Maybe one of them saw me. And so I stand up and I slowly lean my head out to look around this tree, and I don't see anything. And I'm standing there, and I'm just got my head poking out behind this tree, just looking and looking. I don't see anything. So I step back in behind that tree, and I'm listening real carefully. I don't hear anything. Another rock. And now this is like, all right, I'm frustrated. So now I just walk out and start walking in that direction. I don't hear anything, nothing. What throws rocks? So I hunt the rest of the day. I get back to camp. Never saw anything, never heard anything. That was all there it was. And so I get back to camp, and I said, Dad, did you see any hunters come up the ridge I was on? Yeah, because I would always hunt my ridge. He would hunt his ridge. It's kind of how we did it. And he always hunted. He didn't go up nearly as high on the ridges as I did, me being younger and healthier. And I would go up higher, and he didn't hunt quite as hard as me. He said, no, I didn't see anybody else. I said, you see anybody maybe parked down along because from where he would hunt, he could see down at the road and kind of the typical parking spots where people might park or camp or pull over to hunt up the ridges in that area. I said, well, did you see anybody? He said, I saw a couple of people drive by, but they never stopped, kind of rolled along real slow road hunting. But no, nobody ever got out. He says, wow, so somebody was up there throwing rocks at me. He said, I didn't see anybody. I said, where were you at? He said, I was over here all day on my ridge. And so again, it was perplexing. The thought that it could have been a Bigfoot never crossed my mind. I'd never even heard that. It was, again, until the last few months as I began to just look into the phenomena of Bigfoot, I learned that they throw rocks. Now, these are smaller rocks, and now as I look back, I probably snuck in there, sat down behind my tree, and this thing just wanted to know what I was and what I was doing there. It seemed, because as a hunter, I've been hunting and seen a brush pocket or something, and I thought maybe there was deer in there, but I was in the great vantage spot, so I would take a big rock and throw it down in there and see if I could bust a deer out of there or something, or whatever was in there, get him to come out so I could see it. I kind of got the feeling, as I look back, that he was probably just trying to do that. He just wanted to see who was sitting there behind that tree, what I was doing. He was curious. That's the feeling I got. Now, do I know that? Absolutely not. I don't read Bigfoot minds. I am not a. I know I'm really good at understanding how deer and elk and bear operate in the woods, but Sasquatch are beyond me. But it just felt like whoever was there, whatever they're doing, maybe they were just trying to get my attention. Maybe they wanted me to step out so they could see me, see what I was up to. And now that I put it all in place, that makes sense. There was nobody else there. It was impossible. I never heard a sound. I walked in that direction, never heard her sitting, and I didn't see anything. So I'm thinking this thing had to be a Sasquatch. And again, I think back on that now so I started, I don't know, I kind of run out of things to watch on TV. All the Netflix shows you want to watch are done in that downtime. And I got YouTube up. I like to watch a lot of different things on YouTube about bushcraft and watch hunters and carpentry work and all kinds of stuff. I got many interests. And so YouTube is a great place to go. I come across some Bigfoot stuff. And in my mind, I'm an analytical person. I'm like, man, I've been in the mountains forever. And like I said, 6-8 months ago, I was like, there's no Bigfoot. They're not real. It'd be cool if they were, but they can't be real. I would have seen one in all the years of hunting. And then I caught what I really started watching is many of the shows with Jeff Meldrum on them, who, as I understand, recently passed away. But anyway, as a professor with his scientific approach to studying their footprints, that interested me. All right, now we have a legitimate professor who's doing some scientific studies on the footprints, and he's convinced there's something out there. I forget exactly how he used to say it, but he says there's some unknown bipedal primate out there making some of these tracks. Some of these are not fake. And so it got me interested. So I began to watch it, and I read about, or I would watch these shows about how they would throw those rocks. And I think, my gosh, that's it. That's what was happening. No other creature in the woods throws rocks except a person, or I guess now a Sasquatch. And there's no way it was a person. And as I also watched, I don't know that there's really any experts on Sasquatch. I know people spend a lot of time studying them, but the evidence is mostly footprints, obviously, great evidence. But when you get into the court system, and when you really want to find evidence, the firsthand visual experience is one of the weaker forms of evidence. I'm convinced that I saw something unusual that day when that had to be but wasn't a bear. There's nothing fits it. And I'm also convinced that nothing else has ever thrown rocks at me in the woods ever, that there's something going on. But anyway, I think, how did it get away from me? And then I began to hear stories about how they would sometimes move around on all fours really swiftly. Or I think I heard one, he was crab walking. And I think, how could this giant creature elude someone as experienced as me hunting? And to give the context, I think I shot my first deer. And I don't want to offend anybody who might listen who's opposed to hunting. I understand that, and it's not my intent to offend anybody with this, but I shot my first deer when I was 15. And up until late in my 50s, I shot at least one deer or an elk or a bear every year of my life. So nearly over 40 years of successful hunting every year. So I'm I would say I'm pretty accomplished at it. And none of them were, all of them self-guided. So it's not like I was one of those guys that pays somebody $5,000 to put me in a deer stand and kills. These were all self-guided, just me and my dad, or me by myself, or a couple friends hunting in the mountains. But I'd never seen anything. And then people say, "Where's the skeletal evidence? Where's the carcass? Why haven't we found a dead one?" I've spent over 40 years in the mountains. You know how many bear carcasses I found? Zero. And you know what? There's got to be everybody agrees there's more bear in the Rocky Mountains than there are Bigfoot. And you know how many cougars I've found dead? Zero. Now, I found plenty of deer, plenty of elk that were killed by various means, maybe by wolves or disease or automobiles. But never have I ever found a carcass that was of a bear or an elk. So, a bear or a cougar. So why would I expect to ever find a dead Sasquatch? They would have to be more rare in order to escape our attention. So I don't see that as really an argument for why they don't exist. And like I said, having watched that one, and I'm assuming it was a Bigfoot now, these many years later, as it crossed the canyon, I think about the way it moved and the fluid nature of its movement and how quickly he could shift directions and but so fluidly. When I hear about these people that think that Bigfoot's there and it disappears, I've seen elk do that, and they're not magical. Elk can be like a ghost. They can sound like a freight train, or they can just slip away like a ghost. And even elk can do that with his giant hooves that crack and smash tree limbs on the ground. Then why couldn't a soft-footed Sasquatch maneuver better, faster, quicker? It was designed for that type of thing. So I don't know. While I didn't have a lot of experiences, I can't rule out the abilities of these things. And as I said earlier in the beginning, I'm a pastor, and I've been a pastor in the ministry for over 20 years now. And I don't know. I think maybe they thought of a Bigfoot, or I'll throw it out there, or space aliens would cause somebody to stumble in their faith about God or their belief. And it doesn't have to. And you can go back in history and look at what the church has done to science. Galileo was labeled a heretic because of his belief in his identification of the solar system, that the sun was at the center and not Earth. And early Christians felt, wait, we're the most important thing God made, so obviously the whole universe revolves around us. And so he was labeled a heretic. And another gentleman, about the same time period, Giordano Bruno, who was a philosopher and a cosmologist, he was burned at the stake in the Inquisition in Rome because he would not recant from the heresy of believing that the universe was infinite. So I went through a time I'm going to get into a little of the spiritual side, because I think it's important for Christians and people. You don't have to discount God, or you don't have to lose faith in God because of a Bigfoot or
Absolutely.
aliens.
100%.
Yeah, it's Christians and scientists have been at odds many times in history, but God and science has never been. God created science. He created quantum physics. He created space and time. He is not bound by space and time. He created all that there is. He created an infinite universe, and we're the only people in it. We're the only humans, only beings in it that he died for, that Christ died for. Great. Then he created us an infinite universe because he loves us so much and he's so powerful. He wanted to see this magnificent universe, and he wanted us to experience the greatness of who he is. But if he put a million other planets out there across the expanse of an infinite universe, and he's present on all of them, the Bible doesn't talk about that. The Bible doesn't say yes or no. Just like the Bible doesn't have any stance on whether Bigfoot is real or not, we don't have to allow these things to shake us spiritually or in our Christian faith at all. And because the church has historically made some big blunders on science, having excommunicated Galileo, who was proven right, and so was Bruno, who was burned at the stake. I would like people to realize that you don't have to, an experience of any nature doesn't have to in any way take away from your faith in God. They're mutually acceptable.
Yeah.
At least nobody's ever found me a scripture yet. So.
Exactly. And I'm a Christian as well. And the way, because I thought about this a lot too, and the way I also look at it is, so if you look at the Bible, you look at the whole thing, you think of all the stuff that's happened in it. There's a lot of weird stuff in it. There's a lot of not normal things in there. And so why do we not expect there to be weird stuff and stuff out of the ordinary in our world today? That type of thinking just does not make sense to me. How people can be okay with, just really behemoth in the Old Testament and just different things like that. And then today we don't have that anymore. I don't think so. I think it's not crazy to think that there could be things like Bigfoot, or you could talk about other cryptids involved with that as well. And now there's different ways to look into that. On the religious side, there's people that think maybe they're demons, maybe they are giants or Nephilim, or there's so many different ways to think about what Bigfoot could be on the religious side. But do you have any thoughts about, is that anything that you've ever thought of trying to figure out how that fits into your worldview?
Yeah, no, I have quite a bit of thought on that, and I'm pretty confident in my position on it. And that is that, 150 years ago, in the last 150 years, gorilla would, that wasn't, it was believed not to exist 150 years ago. 150 years ago, you had talked about gorillas and the giant squid. You would have been talking fairy tales and monsters that weren't real, and yet they both proven out to be real. And when I think about Bigfoot, all right, so the likelihood of a Sasquatch being real, living in the world, if I look at it just intellectually, it's probably pretty low probability that it could be. But if one shows up, then wow, God created this creature that could hide, so giant, so big, so powerful, that could hide from us, seemingly in our backyards, just out in the mountains and out in the trees and the forest. He made a spectacular creature here. Why would I be anything but excited about what he did? And people talk about the possibility of Bigfoot being like a Nephilim or a giant from old. Yeah, first off, Nephilim is a very controversial subject to all theologians, and it has been for hundreds of years. If somebody wants to hypothesize that Sasquatch could be Nephilim, I'm okay with that. From a Christian perspective, it's a non-salvation issue. In other words,
right,
if you believe it or you don't believe it, you're going to heaven either way. One belief or the other is not going to keep you from heaven. Okay, fine, believe that. I tend to not go that route just because it is such a controversial subject in Nephilim, and I don't see scripture that really. Sometimes I think scripture used, like when they were about to cross the Jordan for the first time into the promised land, they came back and they were talking about the giants and the Nephilim. I think that was more of a metaphorical statement about the size of these people. But you know what? If we had ran into Shaquille O'Neal back then, we would have thought we ran into a giant. And giants were there, even under David's time, when Goliath and his four brothers, obviously very large people. But we have very large people today. So do I think they're Nephilim? I don't think so. I don't think it fits biblically. But again, I definitely would not ever want to divide over that or call somebody anything other than that's fine. That's okay belief. Now, could they be the giants of old from the Old Testament and such? I doubt it. I'm more inclined to believe that they're, I don't know. I don't know. But I don't have to fit it into a Christian worldview. All I have to do is look at it from the perspective Does the Bible exclude or specifically include the possibility? And it's silent on the subject as far as I can tell. So the Bible doesn't, it's not a scientific book. It's not meant to be scientific. If you go back to the whole debate about, I know we're getting off track, but I think it creates a worldview perspective about Christianity and Sasquatch, but the whole debate about young Earth, old Earth. I don't think the early Israel, prior to the Israelites, from the time of Adam and Eve, whether you believe it's metaphorical Adam and Eve or literal, so I don't want to get into that debate, but from then on, by word of mouth, by family talking, they passed down through the generations up until Moses came along and wrote it down, the tales of the early life on earth and the garden and the creation. Do you think that the Israelites had any reason to understand what 13.7 billion years was? They counted maybe 150 sheep at a time. They could not have comprehended 13.7 billion. So God is not going to then incorporate into their theology the idea that the universe is 13.7 billion years old. Young Earth, old Earth, we can debate that all we want, but it's not a scientific journal. It's not meant to be. It's a spiritual book that takes the life of the events in people's lives and teaches spiritual and moral lessons for us to see. And it's inspired by God. I believe that 100%. No doubt it's God. If God could create the heavens and the earth and the universe, he could definitely preserve his word from the time that Moses began to write it until all the other prophets. It would be a simple matter for the creator of the universe to maintain his word through history.
Oh, sure.
So I don't have to doubt.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't have to doubt its legitimacy. But one of the things I left out, and maybe you have some more questions on what we were just talking about, but I just want to throw it out there before I forget. Since that first encounter where that bear, Sasquatch, deer, elk, whatever that thing was, that did not fit in any of my pictures of what animals should look like, that has such an impact on me emotionally that to this day, whenever I have a dream about hunting and I bag an animal, that creature, as I begin to walk up towards it, it begins to morph and change into a human. It was very upsetting for me. I think that maybe expresses how upsetting it was for me that I had pointed my rifle at something that maybe was a person, and now it was a Sasquatch. I've come to believe now that maybe that's what I was seeing, because it was very upsetting for me. And I don't think that's a spiritual event. I don't think the Sasquatch caused those dreams. I think it was the emotion and how dreadful it was that I had pointed my rifle at what could have been a human. So yeah, even today when I have dreams about hunting, they always morph into a human when I get there, wearing antlers or slowly just change, and it's very unnerving dream.
That is really interesting, and that's happened for years then.
Oh yeah, it's happened for 25, 30 years. I have these dreams. Yeah.
Talking about the canyon sighting that you had, so you went over to the other side, you're seeing that the brush was really high. So were you able to estimate then how tall whatever that was would have had to been in order for you to see it?
That brush from where it could have walked, I could never, there was only a few places where I could look through the brush clearly and see where I had been sitting across it. And I'm 6 foot. So that means there's only 2 or 3 spots where the brush was low enough for me to see. And a lot of it was 7, 8 feet tall. So I would have to estimate that it was over 6 foot easy. Could have been 7. It's really hard to tell, but it had to be at least that tall.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I wouldn't have seen it at all.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't have seen it at all.
So this, I believe you said it was Hells Canyon. Is this on the border?
Yeah.
That area?
Yeah, it's on the border of Idaho and Washington.
Okay.
Yeah.
And have you looked to see if anyone else has had experiences similar to that in that area or heard any other things?
Very little. There's very little. And remind me of another thing. I want to go back to that, my dad's hunting.
Okay.
But I'm going to touch on this topic here you were talking about. Very little. And as I use this term loosely, research. To say that I've researched it would be an insult to true scientists, to researchers. But having looked at like all the sites I could find on Bigfoot sightings and stuff, most of the sightings tend to be north of the McCall, that Loon Lake area, north of that, and then of course west over into Washington, and then when you get over into Oregon, they tend to be more on the western edge of Oregon. If you're not familiar with the terrain, I've driven out all that area a lot, from here to Oregon coast, from here up into Washington, and I've been thinking a lot about this. In give a context to why I think what I'm going to say is, one of my primary ways of hunting is to hunt the migration routes. I try to figure out where the animals will migrate, where they'll shift from the high country to the low country, trying to get their patterns and how they move. And I try to set myself up in those locations with the idea that today I see nothing. Tomorrow, as it gets later in the year, it's only going to increase my odds. And it's proven to be very successful. So I think a lot about the weather. When I'm in the mountains, I think a lot about the terrain and the funnels where the animals will move. And it has occurred to me as I was looking at all this and reading about the Sasquatch, and you'll notice, at least this section of the state where I've spent all my time, south of McCall over to Hells Canyon and down, it's very dry. Even when you're in the trees, it's much drier than when you get up into northern Idaho. And of course, if you go out to the coast into California, they're off that Pacific side of the continent where you're getting a lot more moisture. In those California redwoods, and that a lot more moisture there, a ton of moisture on the Oregon coast, leading up until you get over towards Baker, and then it starts to get dry. And you'll see that also in Washington. You kind of loops around the cold, the dampness kind of loops around up north into northern Idaho. I've heard it said that Sasquatch, seen in videos, tend to get where there's bear, there could be Sasquatch. I think so. I think if I look at the patterns, I kind of see more that they want the more moisture. They want moisture areas. And so where I'm at is dry, and it's a lot of high mountain desert, a lot of sagebrush, and then you just touch into the trees. And so a lot of what I saw, my experiences were at the edges of the trees above the sagebrush, that transition area where the animals hang. So I think, and the reason we don't see a lot of activity in this particular area is because it's more of a pass-through area. They may come through, maybe you got a young male looking for a new location to hang out because he's overpopulated, he's adventuring, but I don't think it's like an area they would hang out in. I think they want someplace a little more moist. And I think down this stretch along this lower half of Idaho is a little dry, and I think they would want to, again, do I know this? I have speculation, totally speculation, but that's where I'm thinking the activity is going to be, in more moist areas.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look, I've tried to come up with formulas like, okay, how do I figure out what are the most squatchy areas in the U.S.? And there's a great article about it on the NAWAC site, or Wood Ape site, where they talk about how most sightings happen when, I believe it's a certain amount of annual rainfall, and it might be 36 around there. Okay. I'd have to look it up again, but that is an interest. So if you take that into consideration, yeah, the wetter place is going to be, I think you have more of a chance for sure. But the only thing I was able to find about Hells Canyon, because I did a little research too, is a gentleman who talks about, he's a guy into Bigfoot. His name's Owahi Jack. He's got a cool website. He was riding ATV up Lynn's Saddle around Hells Canyon in Idaho, and had all of a sudden got a feeling like, do not go any further. Like one of those where you go further, you're going to have issues. So they turned around. Actually, they stopped the ATV, turned it around. Then they tried just hiking up a little bit. They couldn't do that either. And it felt like there was almost like some kind of physical wall preventing them from going any further into it. So a weird thing that happened
it's weird.
In the same area. So
yeah, that would be west of where I've had most of my experiences, but yeah, I know where Lynn Saddle is, up above the Snake, one of the tributary type canyons that run down to the Snake that goes through Hells Canyon. Yeah, beautiful country, thick, heavy country. But yeah, I found that interesting. You said where the rain falls 36 inches because, yeah, that's when you get a little north in Idaho, and also, like I said, over towards the coast more. And I think you get back to the Tennessee areas and the Virginias and all that, they got more rainfall there than we do here. So I think that's why Missouri, I think that's why maybe we don't see as many here because it's just a little too dry. Now they'll go through here, but I think they want something a little more moist. I think they want a little more rainfall.
Absolutely. When your dad showed you that picture, did he mention at all like where the picture was taken, or was that not a detail that came up?
No, that's what I wanted to go back to. I said a couple minutes ago, I wanted to go back to that.
Yep.
So that was west of Pagosa Springs, between Pagosa Springs and Durango.
In Colorado?
Yes.
Yep.
And I think that outside of Durango was where they had a video, I think last year before it came out. There were people on a train, and out in the middle off the side of the mountain there, they saw what looks like a Sasquatch.
Oh, yeah.
Walking along their trail. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
With videos.
And that was back in the late 60s when he took that.
It was totally. Okay. So I would say.
Was that a fake one?
It was. So the community really dug into that one, and they found the exact costume from, if you look at it really close, like some dude found the exact, I can't remember who the guy was, but he found the exact costume on Amazon. I was like, oh man, that's too bad. I hate it when that happens, but yeah, that one was unfortunately not a PG
fake
film.
One,
yeah.
Yeah, that's too bad. I could see people have fun doing that sort of thing,
right.
Taking people out, getting the whole train excited. They get to see themselves on YouTube running across the hills.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's the area where he took that photo. And like I said, he never brought that photo out again. Wow. Never talked about it again. In all the years I hunted with him, he never mentioned Bigfoot again. It was just not a subject we ever talked about. And I don't know why. But like I said, I've never been afraid in the mountains, even because I've been out there over 40 years now, 50 years. And I figured if it was dangerous, I'd probably already had a dangerous encounter. So I'm thinking that it's safe. If they're there, they're okay with me being there. But I'll tell you one thing, you hear about guys that want to go shoot one. I could never do it. It would be an impossibility for me. That encounter across the canyon, when I put my scope on that, and now I think back on it, I don't know. What if they are more than just an animal? I would not want to be. I would rather know they exist, see it, and watch it walk away than be the guy that harmed one. I couldn't do it.
That's the thing, right? Because I can't imagine being in that situation. And then you look into, I don't know if you've seen the documentary that Small Town Monsters put out about Justin Smeha, the individual that allegedly shot a Bigfoot in the Sierra Nevadas. It was around the 2010s, so just long enough so that people are forgetting it. And it really affected this guy emotionally. They're interviewing him, and it's like you could tell that he's right back there at it. And it's a very intense documentary. If you haven't checked that out, I would recommend you do so. It's well done. But yeah, any individual that is in that situation, they're going to have to really deal with a lot of fallout, I think, for different reasons. Yeah, absolutely.
I think so.
Also, I would say there's probably a few listeners after the whole Pagosa Springs. So just because that one incident happened doesn't mean there couldn't be Bigfoot around Pagosa Springs. I think I had talked to an individual where they actually had seen one, I believe it was hit by a car in Pagosa Springs. This is about a year ago. I do a call-in show, and the gentleman called in. So I know there is activity in that area over the years, but it's been an extremely interesting conversation. Would you ever get to the point, or I guess I'll ask it this way, have you ever gone on like an actual expedition, or is it a thing where you're out there hunting, fishing, and it's just in the back of your mind and you're ready for if something happens, you'll know what you're looking at?
Yeah, no, that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
I've never gone out with a purpose to hunt or find one. I wouldn't call myself that. And really, the very idea of that's only came up in the last year or so. I have to say, when I was out hunting this year, first off, do they have telepathy? Can they mind speak? Which is formed? I don't know. I don't know of any other creature on Earth that does that. So I'm skeptical, but that's okay. I'm still skeptical about the very existence of them. But here I am talking with you. One would have to actually talk to me in my mind before I believe it. But I don't want to discount other people's experiences, though. That's not my point either. That's one of the, I don't want to be that kind of person either to discount someone's other experiences. But I as I was walking around the woods this year on my hunt, I pray, talk to God. It's more like a talk. When I pray, I say it's more of a conversation that I have on my side with God and stuff. And when I'm talking, if there's a Bigfoot out there, if they're real and they really have telepathy, I would like to experience that. But I don't want to step over any spiritual lines or anything like that. And so did I hear anything back? No, I didn't. I did not. But I did see something that it was unclear, again, what that was. Something moved through the brush, probably only about 40, 50 yards from me, very swiftly, very smooth, quick, and it was gone. Never heard it, wrong color, again, to be an elk or a deer. Couldn't have been a bear. It was right after a four-wheeler had gone by, a couple guys coming through. They were, whenever I hear somebody coming and I'm on a trail, I step off. Again, I don't want them to know I'm there. It's just where I am. I like to be hidden. So I step off, I'm hiding behind brush, and then I keep going. I have to go back, and here they come back the other way again, those guys. And so I'm looking back as I drive past, and I'm standing in the brush, and when they went around this corner, something just moved right out of that corner where they had been, right 40, 50 yards from me. And I'm thinking, that doesn't even make sense. How did whatever it was get there without me hearing it? Again, they drove right past it, didn't see it. I'm looking for antlers. I'm looking for a head. I'm looking for anything that would be looking for color, nothing. And it was gone in about 2 seconds, whatever it was. But again, now I'm beginning to see Sasquatch everywhere. So is that a real experience, or is it just my mind playing tricks on me? Yeah, it's hard to tell. No, I have never been out with the purpose of finding one, but I'm aware. No, I'll look around. It would be really great. I would be really great. And I'm not, a lot of people have very frightening experiences, but I think part of that is, I was thinking about that too. Let me put it this way. I'm not scared of snakes. I'm not scared of spiders. I'm not scared of bear. But there's a proximity thing. When that spider crawls across my eyelid, I'm freaked out. When a snake is crawling up my pants leg, I'm screaming like a girl. Am I afraid of them? No. Now I see one, I'm not afraid of one. And if I see a Sasquatch across the canyon, am I afraid of it? No. But if it taps me on the shoulder and I turn around and see a 10-foot giant standing behind me, maybe I'll scream like a girl. It's proximity. And so when I go out there, I don't have any fear. But then again, if one jumps out behind a bush, who knows what will happen to me. And so I think people that go out there and not expecting anything and come into a close contact with one, they're frightened, and I think it impacts them the rest of their life, even though I don't think they need to be. Like I said, we don't have Sasquatch killing people all over the place. So I don't think they're out there to cause us harm. Again, I'm not an expert. I'm just speculating based on anecdotal evidence. So,
absolutely. I think, yeah, I agree with you. If there's things like that happening, we'd be hearing more about it, because you'd think there would be people to tell the story. I think that might happen when people are out there solo sometimes, unfortunately, and then the story is just never told because there was only one person present and they were the victim or whatever. But I don't think it's a widespread thing for sure. But The last thing that you had mentioned where you saw something for a few seconds, was that also in the Hells Canyon area?
No, that was closer towards, it was further east from there.
Gotcha.
Yeah, a little different location. I don't want to get too specific because.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, and it's not like, like I said earlier, I don't think that this is a place where they hang out. I think if they are here, they're passing through, maybe spend a few days. I don't think it's someplace that they're going to put down roots like they would anywhere else. So I don't think it'd be, as much time as I spent up in the mountains in this area, I just think they would probably be just passing through. I don't think it would do anybody good to know exactly where. Went back to every year for 15, 20 years and never saw one again. And none of these experiences have ever frightened me off. So yeah, I don't think I wouldn't put an expedition together to go to some of these spots. Just not enough. I don't see enough evidence. That's why I think they're transitory. Just move through.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Jeffrey, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing what you have experienced over the years and also your viewpoint as a pastor. And I feel that might help a few listeners that might have had experiences, but that are also religious and don't want to come forward because of that. And just to let them know that, hey, it's okay to be able to share what happened and it doesn't have to go against what you hold with your beliefs.
Yeah. So it was a pleasure. Great talking with you and glad I could hopefully provide some good information for your listeners and some entertainment, if nothing else.
Fantastic. If anything else happens out there in Idaho, feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear from you again. But thank you so much for being on the show, Jeffrey.
Yep, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Before we wrap this episode, I want to say something directly to a very specific group of listeners. If you're in the military, any branch or forces, and if you've seen something that no one can explain, or if you're a national park ranger or forestry worker who's been told to stay quiet, or if you're a pilot who's seen something strange down on the ground, or if you're with the FBI, a federal agency, or working intelligence, and you stumbled upon something you're not allowed to talk about, and if you're a firefighter, paramedic, or search and rescue responder who's heard screams or found tracks that didn't make sense, if you're in the logging industry, on a remote oil field, or a trucker with government contracts, and you've had something happen that you've never told a soul, and if you're a biologist, a wildlife specialist, or a field researcher under contract who has found evidence you're not allowed to report, if you're a pastor, a missionary, or someone on a spiritual retreat, and you saw something that shook your faith, or if you work in the shadows, CIA, NSA, or anything with clearance, and you've seen what the public hasn't, then I want to talk to you. Even if it's anonymous, you can reach me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. The world needs to hear what you've been forced to carry alone, and you're not alone. You've got the story. We've got the mic. See you in the woods. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. Every encounter we share reminds us that the world is bigger and stranger than we think, and that the truth is often hiding just beyond the tree line. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the channel on YouTube, hit the bell so you don't miss the next episode, and share this with a friend who's into mysteries, monsters, or the unexplained. And if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcast, please follow the show there and leave us a 5-star positive review, because all that helps more people discover the show. And remember, if you or someone you know has had a Bigfoot sighting, please, I'd love to hear from you. So email me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com and let's start the conversation. If you haven't gotten a chance yet, check out our membership community over at www.bigfootsocietypodcast.com. And that's where you can hear tomorrow's episode today, early and ad-free, and members-only episodes every week. Also, it's a place to connect with other people that are into the Bigfoot subject as much as you are. Thanks again for following along with the Bigfoot Society. Until next time, keep your eyes open, trust your gut, and never stop asking what else might be out there. And see you in the woods.